Next, sharing project updates and future developments of HSR in Asia and Europe in the wake of COVID-19 is Adjunct Professor Dr. Andrea Giurisin, Special Advisor for the CEO, Italo NTV, and Adjunct Professor for the University of Milan Bicocca. You can engage with him with the live discussion interface just next to the presentation window. Over to you, Andrea.
Good morning or good afternoon to everyone. In this session, I will discuss about the development of high-speed rail all around the world and the impact of COVID-19 crisis. This is very interesting to understand because, of course, many infrastructure are there or are coming in the next year, but at the same time, it's very interesting that the fact that COVID-19 have a huge impact in many countries about the demand. So how to match this infrastructure, this offer, this supply with a lower demand? How long will we stay here, this lower demand? So in my presentation that I will share right now, we discuss exactly the project update and the future developments of high-speed rail in Asia and Europe in the wake of COVID-19. My expertise is quite long in the sector. For example, I create a consulting company working with many railway companies from South Korea, from Europe, from also other continents. And at the same time, with my consulting, I also help as a senior rail consultant at the World Bank, especially in Asia and also in Africa. But my first role was creating the studies office for Italy. And Italy is the first high-speed rail operator, private one, in open access competition. So are using the same infrastructure of the incumbent, but at the same time, we have a new private operator that are offering new offer for the consumer. At the last but not least, I'm also transport economist at the University Milan Bicocca, where I create also center research about rail transportation. I help a lot also the authorities of transport about regulation, but also operational and strategic consultancy for the rail companies. So when we spoke about high-speed rail lines, we can see that in the last years, thanks to the data of UIC, we can see that the number of kilometers increased around 15,000 kilometers in the last 2 years and a half. This is more, the total number of kilometers more than 52,000 kilometers, and it's more than the Earth circumference. This is very, very interesting. But also at the same time, for the high-speed rail, we have different business models. There's not just one single business model. For example, we have a vertical integration in the rail in general. For example, vertical integration we can find in Japan. This is a typical example with a private operator, but it's also a monopolist for some particular line. Think about JR East or JR Central, big operator that are private, they manage also the infrastructure. We have vertical separation. Think about South Korea, Sweden, UK, where the infrastructure manager is a different company from the railway undertaking. And then we have all this structure, for example, Germany, Italy, and Austria, where the incumbent that is a state-owned has also the infrastructure and the railway undertaking at the same time. This is very interesting because in this structure, on the same infrastructure, for example, in Italy, we have a second operator that starts operating. When we speak about high-speed rail lines in the world, we have 52,000 kilometers, but quite 12,000 more kilometers are under construction, and 11,000 is planned for the next years. And when we go to Asia Pacific and Europe, it's very, very interesting that, of course, Asia Pacific, thanks to China, we have the biggest number of kilometers in operation. We're speaking around 40,000 kilometers. In Europe, we have around 10,000 kilometers. But also for the next year, there's a big development in these two areas. We're speaking about 6,000 kilometers more in the Asia Pacific. Think about the project not only in China, but also in India, also in Indonesia that are ready, quite ready to start in the next years. And also in Europe with a new infrastructure, for example, in Italy, Spain, in France, and whatever. And then there's planned infrastructure about high-speed line also for China and Europe that are quite important. We are speaking for these two mega continents around 7.6 thousand kilometers more. So let's go to the single country. China, of course, is 35,000 kilometers, is the biggest by far, even if they start in 2008 with the first infrastructure between Beijing and Tianjin in 2008. And with that first connection right now is by far the biggest in the world. And we have also Spain, that is a very interesting case, because also Spain will go to the open access competition like in Italy. They copy the Italian model also in Spain. Then we have Japan that, as we saw, we have a business model that is vertical integration. And then we have France, Germany, that probably they will open to the competition in the next year. Of course, the European Commission gave obliged the countries to open to the competition, same level as we have in Italy. Italy, that is not huge infrastructure, but we have a strong competition since 2012, and South Korea, for example, where we have also competition since some years right now with the two operators, Korea and SR, that are competing on the same line, even if the competition is different from Italy, because, for example, in South Korea, we don't have competition on price that is fixed by the government. In Italy, we have revenue management exactly as we have for the aviation sector. So, speaking about aviation sector, this is some interview that I did, for example, for Bloomberg Business Week. That is very, very interesting, because on Bloomberg Business Week, it was clear in this article that is coming competition. Italy was the first case, but Europe is going exactly in this direction. Spain in 2021 will have the second operator. In 2022, they have the third operator. And also other countries will go in the same direction. And this is good. This is good for the sector, because competition means that there's possibility to grow, possibility to be more efficient, possibility to have more passengers, to make the use of the train more and more comfortable for the consumer. The cake is growing, as I told to Reuters in my interview some years ago. Thanks to that, the Italian market thanks to the competition, the Italian market is growing a lot. So as we can see here, for example, in Italy, we have a reduction of the price of the ticket around 40%. Since when we have competition, so the year base is 2011, the years before that we have a competition that starts 28th of April 2012, at the same time, we have a strong increase of the demand. We have an increase of the demand that is more than double with the same infrastructure. So in Italy, we have the same infrastructure, quite the same infrastructure, and we have the double of the demand. At the same time, there was not a strong increase of GDP like in some part of the world, but we have the same level of GDP. So same infrastructure, same GDP, so no economy grow, but we have the double of demand. How was possible? Of course, was possible thanks to the competition. But then what happened? Happened that we have the COVID-19 hurricane. So here there's some estimation that I helped to do for the USC. We have two scenarios, the slow recovery and quick recovery. Probably we are more closer to the slow recovery with the second waves that is coming in many countries. For example, here in Europe, but also in Asia, we have to understand it will be really a quick recovery. But in any case, the missed revenue is huge. For Europe and Asia, we are speaking together more than 50 billion in the slow recovery case, 50 billion of euro. And in Europe and Asia could be around 20 billion of euro for 2021. In the quick recovery is more than 40 billion of euro. And it's very, 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 very impacting the sector. And this is the major crisis that we have never had in the world about the transportation. It was very clear that the crisis is not finishing. Here is my estimation that I made, thanks to the data of the companies, about the development of high-speed rail traffic in Italy. As you can see, during April and May, we have the traffic close to zero. Then there was a slow recovery, or a small recovery during the summer period. But right now, with the second wave, we are going closer to zero. Just in the last days, for example, Italo announced that they decreased the number of the train around 90%. So the recovery for the high-speed rail in Italy, but also in the other country of Europe, it will be very, very, very difficult, and will be very, very slow. So what it was done, for example, in Italy, I helped a lot the government to try to make the good measure, economic measure for the sector. For example, there was the reduction of access charge. Access charge is paid by the rail operator for using the infrastructure. The government pay the infrastructure manager directly, and there was this reduction, and this money finally arrived to the operator that have finally a reduction of access charge. Thanks to that, the recovery could be a little bit quicker. But of course, it's not enough. So there was also a fund for the rail sector, for the commercial market, for example, in Italy, to help the sector. It was around 1.2 billion euros. So all the operator, private and public, freight and passenger, they received this amount of money, in total 1.2 billion of euro, that helped the sector. So in Italy, we can tell that something was done. What we help, what we are asking right now to the government, for example, is to extend this measure also for 2021, because the economic crisis is not finished yet, and the recovery is not there. As we can see from this table, in the rail, that we had some intervention in Italy was quite enough, quite good. But in general, for the rail, there was not big intervention as we had in the aviation. So we have a problem of competition between the aviation and between the rail, because if the aviation was able to receive a lot of money, a lot of state aid, at the same time was not happening in the rail sector in some countries, we can have a not clear, fair competition between the two sectors. This is very important because the crisis of the high-speed rail was bigger than the aviation. About the aviation, we spoke a lot, but in reality, if we check the number, for example, at the last week of March, the supply decrease was stronger in the high speed in Italy or in France, for example. And the number of traffic passenger in the half of April during the lockdown was stronger decrease in the high speed rail, for example, in Italy than for the airlines. So we have a stronger crisis for the high speed rail than for the aviation. And this is an element to be taken in consideration, especially because the recovery will be not so easy. So what we are seeing right now that, of course, the demand is not high. The demand is not coming back so fast. Of course, depending on the level of COVID-19, the level of second waves of COVID-19 in the different countries. One case is China, that is completely different. Another case could be, for example, other country like Japan, that is very, very interesting. But at the same time, take in consideration that fulfill a train is not exactly then fulfill a plane. Here an example, this is an Italo AGV 575, and this train has 462 seats. A normal plane that could be on the same routes in competition, a typical A320, Airbus 320, it could be from AirAsia, from Alitalia, they have 180 seats. So when the demand is not so high, it's easier to fulfill the the plane instead of the train, because with a lower number, with a smaller number of passengers on board, to fulfill the train will be not so easy. So in this phase, what we saw that it's not so easy to fulfill the train, and we have to take in consideration also because the aviation receive a lot of help, more than rail normally. The other elements that we have to take in consideration, of course, is that this crisis is not symmetric. We will have some country, for example, that they will go out from this crisis faster. The typical is from Asia, and others, like Europe, will be not so fast the exit from this crisis. This is an element also to take in consideration about the capability to invest in new infrastructure, the capability of the demand to coming back. With the 7% less of GDP in Italy, 2021 versus 2018, of course, the consumer expenditure will be lower. In other countries like China, for example, we will see that this increase is quite important, more than 15% more between 2021 and 2018. So, of course, also the consumer expenditure could grow more. So take in mind this element that this crisis of COVID-19 is not symmetric. But what are the long-term effects? So, of course, as I told you, in many countries and many routes, we are the competition between the plane and the rail that are on the same routes. That means that the plane, as I told you, is easier to fulfill the plane, probably. And at the same time, what is the regulation for these two sectors? This is the example that I gave also to Bloomberg some years ago. Thanks to the competition, thanks to the high-speed rail in Italy, the Milan-Rome routes that are around 500 kilometers, a little bit more than 500 kilometers, right now is 8% for the rail, high-speed rail. Thanks to that, of course, the rail is growing a lot. But if we have competition of the plane, think about the new infrastructure that you want to do, make for 500, 600, 1,000 kilometers, of course, we have to think about the regulation state aid to have a real competition between high-speed rail and the aviation sector. And that's very, very interesting in several countries. And also the other elements to take in consideration is when you make new infrastructure, when you make also the new operator that have to enter in the market, think about what will be the level of access charge. This graph show very well that high-speed rail could be competitive with the low cost. For example, Italy is a lower cost per available seat kilometer, CASK, than the majority of the airlines, including a lot of low cost like EasyJet and Vueling. So this is very interesting, how the high-speed rail, thanks to this mentality of private operator, could have a lower cost, and we have to reduce these costs. But a lot of costs are not linked to the OPEX, to the operational expenses, but of course is linked to the access charge for the use of the infrastructure. And the access charge could have a very different level. In China, for example, many times is close to zero, even if it's changing the system. In Sweden, the total the access charge cost is around 5% of the total cost, and for Italy is around 30%, so not so high, similar to Korea, that in reality is a 33% of the revenue. And in SR in Korea, they have 50% of the revenue, but in Spain, for private high-speed rail operator, is around 60%. So we have to take in consideration that a direct cost could be paid. Normally, the direct cost, in this case, we are thinking about 5–10%, no more of this total cost, but the ability to pay the markup to recover also the cost of the infrastructure is another part that is very, very important to take in consideration. What will be the ability to pay for the railway operator in the future after this crisis of COVID-19? This is a big question mark that we have to take in consideration. The other element is, remember that we are in a market where the consumer have possibility to choose. They can choose the car, they can choose, for example, for aviation, as I told you before. And this is an example. Take in mind from a railway operator perspective and for consumer perspective that we have to be able to lower the price to be very competitive with other transport modes. And this is an example. For example, Italo has a yield with the last data available, public available, around 8 cents per passenger kilometers. That means for 1,000 kilometers, the cost was around $80. But for example, JR East, the market is completely different. We are speaking more than 20 cents per passenger kilometer. And for example, in Indonesia, is just a forecast, but is not sure about this kind of pricing, could be around 10 cents per passenger kilometer. That is 23% higher than Italy. So we have to reach every single customer. We have to be able to lower the cost of the railway operator to be very able to reach to increase the market share of the high-speed rail in Italy, in Indonesia, and whatever part in the world. The last slide. So we have to change our mentality. In Europe, we have private operators that start to enter in competition. Of course, it's not exactly the same in the other country. In China, for example, they are searching for market efficiency, but of course they are working in this direction. As a former visiting professor of China Academy of Railway Science, I can tell you that this is a direction that was taken by a Chinese leader to go in searching for more and more efficient in the railway sector. The other elements is, for example, in South Korea, we saw the competition. In Japan, there's a completely different model that is private vertical integrated model. But also, we have a strong investment in Asia. Think about Indonesia, think about India, think about Laos, for example, and think about what will be in Thailand, for example. This is another example. So we have a strong potentiality for the rail sector, for the high-speed rail. We have to change the mentality to have a market mentality to go in this direction, to have the possibility to increase the use of the rail and the high-speed rail. So with that, I thank you very much for the attention. And with this, I finish the sharing of my competition, and I hope that this meeting will be real in the following years to meet and to speak and discuss about the new project that we have in Asia and Europe for the next year.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Very good insight into HSR.